بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. So today we'll just go through a few masail regarding zakat. Let's try to sit closer inshallah. So zakat is an ibadah which is fard upon all of us. Zakat is an ibadah which is fard upon all of us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا آتَيْتُم مِّن زَكَاةٍ تُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُضْعِفُونَ. That whatever zakat you give, seeking Allah's pleasure with it, then it is multiplied by Allah. It is such people who multiply their wealth in real terms. So although zakat it seems as though you're giving away, but when you give zakat, you're actually increasing your wealth. So then you're going to say to me, okay, how does that mean you increase your wealth? So first of all, you're purifying your wealth. When you give zakat, you purify your wealth. And second of all, it increases in terms of barakah. So when you give zakat, there's more barakah in this wealth, which means that you can use this wealth more. This wealth will last you for longer. So what does zakat actually mean? So in Arabic, zakat means has two meanings. Number one, to purify. So it purifies your wealth. And number two, it means a nima, that it increases your wealth also. Zakat is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So it's a pillar of Islam, shows its importance. And in Sharia, it refers to a person, any Muslim who possesses the zakat, the threshold, and he has to pay 2.5% on that. If he reaches that threshold, he pays 2.5% on certain types of wealth. Just one thing, with questions, I'll stop at certain times and I'll ask you if you've got any questions. Yeah. And so what's the threshold? I'll explain after. And it has also been interpreted as a means to purify one's wealth by distributing a prescribed amount to the poor as a fundamental ibadat. So it's an ibadat, it purifies your wealth. Even though a person, he may have a lot of wealth, but if he does not give zakat, then there's no barakah in his wealth. Whereas a person who has a small amount of wealth, but he gives his zakat, then there will be barakah in his wealth, which will result in it lasting longer, and he will feel content with this. You know, a person, he can have however much wealth he wants, but if he's not paying his zakat, then what will happen is he will never feel content with this wealth. He will always want to have more wealth. Whereas a person who's got less wealth, if he's paying zakat, he'll feel this sense of contentment that I am happy with what I have, and it will suffice for him. Zakat in the Holy Quran. Zakat is mentioned 32 times in the Quran, and there are 15 such cases where it refers to sadaqah. So sadaqah, that includes zakat, and includes other types of giving wealth out as well. So just a few examples here. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ. So on many times when zakat comes in the Quran, it comes after salah. It shows the importance, because everyone knows that salah is such an important ibadat. You pray that every day. Whereas zakat you're giving once a year, so people don't see as important. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He brings it again and again with the ibadat of salah. So He shows His importance too. وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's describing the qualities and the sifat of believing men and women. So believers, for them to be classed as a believer, for someone to have kamil iman, someone to be a complete believer, he needs to have these qualities. And one of those qualities is وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ, that he gives his zakat. What is the virtues of giving zakat? The parable of those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah is that of a grain of corn. It grows 7 years, and each ear has 100 grains. Allah increases manifold to whom He pleases. So zakat, when you give out zakat, it is like the grain of a corn. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing how much ajr, how much reward you will get for this, for giving zakat, for giving in charity. So he explains, he gives tashbih, he resembles it with a grain of corn. That a corn, it grows 7 years, and each ear has 100 grains. So 7 years, and each corn has 100 grains, so 700. 100 times 7, 700. So 700 ajr a person will get. And who knows what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can multiply this to. And whatever zakat you give, seeking Allah's pleasure with, it is such people who multiply their wealth in real terms that came at the start. Take sadaqah, obligatory alms, out of their wealth, through which you may cleanse and purify them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here as well, how giving zakat can purify and cleanse a person's wealth. So one thing we need to understand is zakat is not a fine, it is a worship. So normally when you give a fine, you feel a burden upon yourself. But when you give zakat, you shouldn't feel this burden, you should feel that it is going to use. And it is not a punishment, you should see it as a worship, you should want to do this. And one should look forward to paying zakat, as it will be a means of purification, blessing and great reward. So regarding to the masail now, according to Ahnaf, the most important principle that we take into consideration is anfa' lil fuqara, that we try to, wherever there are different opinions, we try to see which one is the most beneficial for the poor. So which one will give the most beneficial benefit to the poor, we take that opinion. And wherever there's a difference of opinion, then you take the most cautious approach to it, so that you say, for example, one opinion may say that zakat is, you don't have to pay zakat, and another opinion will say you have to pay zakat. The more cautious approach is that you pay zakat. Otherwise, if you had to pay zakat and you didn't pay zakat, then you will be sinful on the Day of Judgment. Admonition for not paying zakat. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever is made wealthy by Allah and does not pay zakat on their wealth, on the day of resurrection their wealth will be made like a bald-headed poisonous male snake with 2 black spots over their eyes. The snake will encircle his neck and bite his cheeks and say, I am your wealth, I am your treasure. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited the holy verse, let not those who withhold of that which Allah has blessed them, to the end of the verse. So here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is showing the punishment of a person who does not give zakat. So it says here, on the day of resurrection, their wealth will be made like a bald-headed poisonous male snake with 2 black spots over the eyes. So this is the punishment for a person who does not give zakat. Many a times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives punishment in that very same thing which you did not do in this world. So for example here, the wealth that you did not pay zakat on, the actual wealth will take form of a snake. As he says here, bull-headed poisonous snake with 2 black spots over the eyes. And it will encircle his neck and bite his cheeks and say, I am your wealth, I am your treasure. Zakat in the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned to us and said, O Muhajirun, there are 5 things with which you will be tested, and I seek refuge with Allah lest you live to see them. And one of those things was, they do not withhold the zakat of their wealth. But rain will be withheld from the sky, and were it not for the animals, no rain would fall on them. So that's just another warning to us all. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when you pay zakat, you have fulfilled what is required of you. So now going into the masail, that whom is zakat obligatory upon? So first of all, someone who is sane, he has no mental health issues, then it is zakat will be obligatory upon him. An adult, so a person who has reached bulugh, he's reached the age of puberty, and so zakat is not necessary on children's wealth. Muslim, so a revert, it'll only be he'll only have to pay zakat once he has embraced Islam. Before that, he does not have to pay zakat. Even after he becomes Muslim, he does not have to catch up on that as well. Zakat threshold. So anyone who reaches the threshold at the start and the end of the lunar year, threshold will go into after as well. So threshold, what is meant by nisab? So nisab is that if you reach it, then you have to pay zakat now. But in terms of nisab, one thing to remember is you pay zakat on 4 things. Any cash that you may have, gold, silver, and any merchandise, stock. So in all of these, you have to take the value of its gold and silver. So has it reached a certain value of gold and silver? And if it has reached that value, then you pay zakat on this. So here you have the gold nisab. I checked this today, and the last date that was recorded for gold was on the 28th, so a few days ago. Gold was £56.92 per gram, and we have to pay 20 misqals of gold, which is 87.48 grams of gold. For 1 gram is £56.92. So the full nisab, if anyone reaches let's just say 4,500, anyone reaches 4,500, then they would have to pay zakat on that. And if there's a silver nisab as well, so which is 200 dirhams, and in which is 612 grams in this day and age. So a few days ago, 28th of March, the price for silver was 64 pence per gram. So for 612 grams, you're paying £390. So £390 is the nisab, is the threshold that if you reach that amount, then if you have that amount, then you pay zakat on that wealth. Then you are liable to pay zakat. You have to pay zakat. Now, one thing to remember is in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, the gold and the silver amount, there was not such a big difference. So here you see it's 390 and 5,000. So someone could say, which nisab, which threshold are you going to take? In Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, these two thresholds, the amount of gold and silver, they would be similar. There wouldn't be much difference. But here in our time, you see there's a big difference. So the ulama, they say that we take why I said the principle at the start, anfa lil fuqara, the most benefit you can give for the poor. So you take the silver nisab. If you owe only gold, then you can go by the gold nisab. But if you have mixed zakat of assets, then you should go by the silver. So has anyone got any questions up till now? No?
So children, if they get to like 391, you said if you get to that amount of wealth, you have to pay zakat.
Yeah.
So what if the child gets to that?
The child he does not pay zakat. Anyone who has not reached bulugh, he does not pay zakat. Yeah? So now, when do you pay zakat? So we pay zakat once a year, but how do you determine what that date will be? So to determine that date, you need to see that when was the first time I reached the nisab. So the first time you reach the threshold, you need to find out, and then look a year after that. Did you have that threshold as well? And then if you did, then that will be your set date now. So take for example, you reach the threshold the first time, and you need to remember the year you do is according to Islamic year, not the Gregorian calendar. So say for example, you reach the threshold in Ramadan. First of Ramadan, you reach the threshold. Then the next year, you look on the first of Ramadan, did you have the threshold or not? If you have the threshold, then the date that you'll be paying zakat now is on first of Ramadan. So your date will not change unless your unless your wealth goes below zero. If it goes below zero, then your date will reset. So you'll have to check again that when do I reach the nisab now, and then do the same thing again. That this is the date I reached the nisab. 1 year later, have I reached the nisab or not? And if you reach the threshold, then that will be your set date. But if it goes up and down during the year between those two dates, then it doesn't matter. It will not count. Your date will still stay the same, even if it goes below the threshold. Any questions?
So let's use the extra. If you don't have the money, you just don't pay it. You don't have the same over or the same amount.
If you don't have the threshold,
Yeah.
yes, you don't need to pay after.
See how you need to pay 2.5% of your wealth? Does that mean like the wealth you've made in that year or all of your wealth in general?
We'll get to what you have to pay and how much you have to pay over that. So, any questions?
Just on the nisab, can you go back to the slide before?
Yeah.
So it talks about obviously gold and silver, but if you don't have gold of £5,000 worth of gold, but you've got £5,000 worth of cash,
Yeah.
it's got to come from it.
So then,
Nisab is just, although it's talking about gold and silver, you could have £5,000 worth of cash.
so the 5,000 cash, you change the gold into £5,000 pounds.
Yeah, yeah,
So then you take that as that will be a threshold now.
yeah. So it's not physical gold that you need to have.
It's the value of the gold. Any questions on this? No? So, just for you now. From this, when will be his zakat? When will be his date? The date that he'll have to pay zakat. When will be his date?
Is it the first?
First of all,
You said when would be his date?
yeah.
First of all, like the first of all, no.
No. Because it goes far. It goes under
Huh?
the threshold. It's so far. It doesn't have to be yet. Because it goes under.
So what do you say? What did I say first? You look at when was the first time he reached above the nisab, the threshold, the nisab. The first time was first of Ramadan, and then after that it dropped to zero. So then you forget that bit. This bit you don't count this. So then you look after this. When was the next time you reached the nisab? Safar. So then now you look a year after this, because he didn't drop below zero. He didn't go to zero below. So you look a year after this, and on Safar the next year, has he got the nisab or not?
Yes.
So then that would be his set date. So on this first of Safar, he pays zakat. Yeah? Now a lot of times what happens is a person, he cannot remember the first day here he reached the nisab. If he can, then he should try to make an estimate. If he cannot make an estimate, then he should select a date. It does not have to be within the month of Ramadan. Now, what people tend to do is they want to pay their zakat in the month of Ramadan, obviously, because you get more reward for it. What one should remember is the zakat was due on the date that the date was. You cannot change that date. So if you want to pay on in Ramadan, then it's fine. But you must remember that it was due. You used the amount that was due when that date was. So whenever that official date was, so even if it was, for example, in the example before, it was in Safar. So if he had the threshold in the Safar, and that amount that he had, you pay 2.5% of that, even if he was to pay in the Ramadan after, is fine. Now, what type of wealth is zakat obligatory upon? So, zakat is, you pay zakat on 4 types of wealth. First of all, cash, so that could be in hand or in bank, anything. You pay zakat 2.5% on that. Gold and silver, in whatever form they are in. So, if they're in coins or nuggets or bars, whatever it is, you pay zakat on that. Or it could be in the form of jewelry as well, which is very common these days. If the item is 50% or more of gold, so 12 to 24 karat gold, then you pay zakat on the full item. So you look at the value of the full item and you pay zakat 2.5% of that. And one thing to remember is the value is not according to how much you bought it, it's according to the market value. And if it's less than 50%, then in that case, you look at how much of that is gold. So anything below 12 karat, you look at how much of that is gold, and then you find out the value for that and pay 2.5% on that. So if it's above 50% gold, 12 to 24 karat, then you pay zakat on the full item. If it's less than 12 karat, then you pay zakat on just the amount of gold that there is. Yeah. Any merchandise, any stock you have for a business, you need to pay zakat for that. That will come as well. There's the rules regarding that will come ahead. And livestock, you do pay zakat on livestock. However, most people don't really have livestock. So money owed to you. Now, any money owed to you, how do you pay zakat on that? So you have to first of all need to look at what type of a debt it is that you're being owed. So, for example, first of all, there is a strong debt. So, a strong debt is when you have anything that's been owed to you for zakatable assets. So, that can be cash, gold, silver, or merchandise, or even livestock. So, any of this, if you're being owed money for any of these, then it will be a strong debt. And so, when you get that money, when at the end of your year, you will need to take, you will need to include that in the amount as well. So you need to pay 2.5% on that amount too. So you can either pay at the end of every year, or when you get the money back, you can pay that money for the previous years too. So you have 2 options. Yes, so the person, he actually owes his money, he owes his wealth, so he will have to pay zakat on this immediately. Although it is not necessary until the money is received. So until the money is not received, it is not necessary to pay for this. But if he wants to, he can pay before. So we skip medium debt for now, we go to weak debt. Weak debt is any other type of wealth which is owed. So it is not zakatable. Any other type of wealth, it has not come in, it's just, you're not really given anything for this to be owed to you. It's just for some reason coming into your ownership. Then for this, you don't. So for examples would be any outstanding wages. So sometimes what happens is the company, they delay your wages. At times that can happen as well. So let's take for example, they delay 1 year's worth of wages. So then you don't need to pay zakat on that wealth until the wealth comes into your hands, comes into your ownership, and you don't need to pay for the previous years also. So you only pay zakat on that wealth once it comes into your hands. Similarly with rental income, if someone he delays your rental income, he gives 1 year late, then it's fine. You only pay once this wealth comes into your hands. Same for mahar, dowry, that you only give once you have received it. Inheritance also. Medium debt. So now medium debt, that's any money owed from the sale of a non-zakatable property. So that can be any of your personal any of your personal stuff that you sold. The money getting back on that. Now, about this, there's difference of opinion. So whether you have to pay zakat on it or not. So one opinion is you have to pay. It is like a strong debt. One opinion is it is a strong debt, so you'll have to pay zakat on it immediately and also catch up on the years that you didn't have this wealth. So you'll have to catch up on those years. And the other opinion is that it is like a weak debt, which means you'll only have to pay once you get the money, and you don't have to pay for the previous years. Now, according to this, you have a complete choice. It's up to you. There's no real factor to determine which one is better. But a lot of the fuqaha, they tend to go with the second opinion. The zakat only once received. You don't need to pay zakat once you receive this wealth. Any questions?
You said if you forget your date or you don't know your date, you're allowed to pick your date. So what if you know the date, but because you want to benefit from, say for example, Ramadan, you decide to pick a date during Ramadan. So, for example, your first transition threshold was probably Shawwal, so after Ramadan. But then you decide to pay your zakat Ramadan the next day, so it's not yet completed yet. So you're allowed to do that.
You can't pay zakat earlier. So if you want to pay zakat earlier in Ramadan, you can. But then you need to look on that day after that and see how much you paid. Was it the right amount or not? So if you paid more, then you can't really do anything about that. That's fine. Whatever actually you paid will be counted as sadaqah anyway. But if you paid less, then you need to catch up on that as well. Yeah.
When you have zakat on business stock, if you don't have like the money on hand to pay for the business stock, like let's say you have a lot of stock in your business, or you have like a lot of stuff that you're selling right now, but you don't have that money on hand, would you have to sell the things immediately to fill up the zakat, or
What do you mean by you don't have the money on hand?
like if you like have a business, right?
Yeah.
And you spent a lot of money on getting the equipment and things to sell for the business, which would be zakatable, I think. And so you don't have that much money on hand. Like, would you have to sell the things from your business to for the zakat if it's too much?
We'll get to that after.
It means like the profits, like see like how you get stuff and like you have to like want to make the profits off of it, but like you don't have the money to like get more stock. Same thing, should you just sell stuff or like should you do it by that?
We'll get to that after as well. Sweet.
Just a question, see if you go back to that one. The cash in hand, etc. Do you need to hold it for a certain period of time before it becomes accountable?
No, as long as you've got the threshold at the start and the threshold at the end.
So it's not about telling you you have to have it for a period of 12 months.
No.
That's not.
So it can fluctuate up and down. It's fine.
Basically to do with himself, that's it.
Yeah.
To do with how long you held that money for.
Yeah.
So, where exactly do you pay zakat?
Hmm?
Where do you pay
Wait, we'll get to that as well. So now, just example of backdating, that someone owed you £1,000, so then he didn't give you until the 4th year. So you need to pay the last 3 years. So you need to pay 2.5% of the first year. So 2.5% of the first year of 1,000 will be £25. Then you need to minus £25 for the second year. So you don't pay the second 2.5% from the 1,000. You pay from £975. Then to 2.5% of that, which is £24.37 or 38 pence. And then the next year you need to minus that as well, which will give you £950. And then do 2.5% of that, which gives you £24. And then add all those up, and that's the amount of zakat that you'd have to pay for the last 3 years.
Can you like pay? Can you like do like you pay zakat and like you don't have to pay zakat for the next few years.
Um,
You can't do that.
if you want to pay zakat for the next 3 years,
Yeah.
you need to make sure you have the nisab at that moment. You need to make sure you have the threshold at that moment. Then and you need to make sure that you have conviction that you will have the nisab, you'll have the threshold for the next 3 years. So if you've got a successful business, then you will know that you will know how much profit you're going to get. You'll have all the data and stuff, so that you can pay for the next 3 years. But again, you need to check at the end of every year that however much you paid, was it the right amount or not? And if it was less, then you need to catch up on that. So another, just regarding this, is if any of you knows the formula for depreciation, then it's easy as well. You know the formula for depreciation?
It's like that or something.
Back, you older in school, no? No? Yeah? It's fine, we won't complicate it. So zakat on merchandise. So one key term to remember on stock merchandise is that if you had intention that this thing that you have bought at the time of the time that you bought this thing, if you had intention that you're going to be selling it, then you need to pay zakat on this. And if you bought it with the intention that you're going to be selling it, and then after that you decided to keep it. So if, for example, you bought a laptop and you decided to, at the time of when you were buying it, you had intention that you're going to sell it. Then after that you saw that this laptop was really good, for example, then so you decided to keep it. So now you will not have to pay zakat on this. Even if again you decide to sell it, you will still not have to pay zakat on this laptop. If an item was purchased for personal use. Yeah, so one thing to remember is that you need to have a firm intention. So it can't be like a half intention where you say, if it is good, then I will keep it. If it's not, then I will sell it. So then, if it's an intention like that, then it will not be zakatable. Items purchased for sale, rented out in the interim. This item is also zakatable. The rent received, you give zakat on that. So these are just a few points to remember, that when you have zakat on a stock, you do not look at the value of the cost price or the price that you put it on, the selling price. Rather use the market value. Also, many businesses, they may sell retail, and some they may sell wholesale. So you need to take consideration of that as well, because the market value for each can differ. Dead stock, so obsolete, those stuff which has gone obsolete, which no longer has a value, that will not be zakatable. There's no value to it. And those things which are those goods that are manufactured or in the form of raw material, for example, ingredients or packaging, because obviously that will go to the final product, so and it's going to be sold, so that will be zakatable also. But your property of your business or fixtures and fittings of the business, you don't need to pay zakat for that. So if you have a building for your business, you're not selling the building, you're not selling the chairs and the tables in the building, so you don't need to pay zakat on that. So just a quick case study for you guys. Which of these would you pay zakat on? Which of these would you not? This is, for example, someone's got a restaurant. Which of these would you pay zakat on? Which of these would you not? Go in order. So meat. Would you pay zakat on the meat? You're selling the meat, obviously. It's a restaurant. So you're going to pay zakat on vegetables? Salt? So, just one thing. if you have salt in a package, then you don't take this. You take consideration of that. So you just pay according to the whole package. It's not how much you put in the food. If you know what I'm trying to say. As in, you're only going to be using a pinch of salt in the food, but then you don't take consideration of that, of how much it will take out of the full cost for that meal. You take consideration of the package. Flour,
Yes.
the chairs,
No.
No.
cutlery,
No.
sugar.
Yes.
No. It's kitchen utensils.
Sorry,
Food kitchens.
sugar. You're selling the sugar.
Not selling.
You're selling the sugar. Sugar you pay zakat on. Building,
No.
Oh yeah, when it gets to you.
Hmm?
Yeah. Because when the money goes to you.
the building. You don't pay zakat on building. You're not selling the building. Any cash that you have in hand or in the bank,
Yes.
yes, you pay zakat on that. A delivery car,
No.
cash machine,
No.
food packaging,
Yes.
tables and tablecloths,
No.
decorations.
No.
What if it's made of gold?
Huh?
What if your decorations are made of gold?
Yes.
Then you pay zakat on it. Drinks,
Yes.
kitchen utensils.
No.
Someone say yes.
You
Yeah,
said
it depends.
Depends.
You're not selling it. Or if it's gold, then money owed,
yes.
loans to be paid.
Yes.
So these are just business assets, some which are zakatable, so which ones are not zakatable. So any cash owned by the business, that will be zakatable. Any cash receivables, money owed to the business for cash loan, that will also be zakatable. Trade receivables, so any outstanding invoices for goods and stock, that will also be zakatable. And any stock or inventories bought to resell, that will also be zakatable. Those things which are not zakatable, any service receivables, so you haven't got the money yet, you will not have to pay zakat for any service receivables. Prepaid expenses, so it's already been paid, so on that date, whenever your date is for zakat, you will not pay zakat on that. Fixtures and fittings came before, you don't need to pay zakat on it. Property, plants and equipment, you're not selling, so you don't need to pay zakat on that. And intangible fixed assets, you don't need to pay zakat on that too. So anything you pay for copyright, trademark, etc., you don't need to pay zakat on that. Any questions? No?
So let's say you had like you had money, you had enough money, but then when you took out the task, you don't have like enough to pay zakat.
Hmm?
See if you have like you have enough money, but then when you take out the task, you can't pay and
Take out the task.
Let's pull your phone. You ever take out a task?
As in, give me example. No? So this, yeah.
Like what I was trying to say earlier, what happens if I like own a store and inside the store there's like, let's say £50,000 worth of things that I'm trying to sell,
Yeah.
but on hand I only have, let's say, £500. So I have more than the nisab, but if I had to pay the zakat, it would put me in debt. Do you have to sell some of your things inside of the store?
Things inside the stores in the stock, or
Like, yeah.
yeah, you just sell that and then whatever money you receive, pay zakat from that. So which things are deductible now? So things that you do not need to pay zakat on. So for example, bills. So any bills which are already due, then you do not need to pay zakat on this. If you want, I can give you the PowerPoint after. Yeah. any bills which are not already due, sorry, you can deduct that. You do not need to pay zakat on that. But any future bills, they're not due yet, so you will have to pay zakat on that as well. You cannot deduct that. Yeah.
So when you say bills which are already due, what is that bill due this month, for example, if you have monthly payments?
Yeah. So those months which, say for example, your zakat date is in Ramadan, but before that there's been January, February, March,
Yeah.
and you've had bills that are due from those 3 months, then you can deduct that
So for the previous
for the previous months. Yeah.
for the previous 11
Anything that you've got left behind to pay from the previous months, you can deduct. But future ones you cannot deduct.
right? So basically any bills that you may have paid in the past year, like the electricity bill, that type of stuff, is that what you're referring to?
Sorry?
Like the utilities bills that you've paid in the
Yeah,
past?
yeah. Not as in you've got left to pay.
But then if you, like say utility bill, if you have a gas bill or electricity bill, you
Yeah.
pay that monthly.
Yeah, you pay that monthly.
So is this then, how much have I paid in the past year?
No, as in if you've got anything left to pay for from the previous months. So say you haven't paid for January, February, March,
Yeah.
but it's due. You need to pay, but you haven't paid.
Yeah.
Then you can deduct that from your threshold.
Right, but if you pay things monthly anyway,
Yeah.
right debit,
Yeah. So
what do you do there then?
if you pay monthly, then obviously you only take if you're paying every month,
Yeah.
then you don't really look at the last month because
Usually the last month.
yeah. As it's just saying that if you haven't paid for the previous months, then you can deduct that.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite make sense. I'm just trying to understand. So, you have your external, you have your outgoings, you have your bills to pay,
Yeah.
electricity, etc. Do you then, is that a deductible for the past month? If you're paying direct debit every month, yeah,
Yeah.
are you deducting just the last month's payment?
As in, if you already paid, then there's nothing to deduct. If you've already paid it,
Yeah.
then there's nothing to deduct.
Right.
It's saying that if you've got any payments left to pay,
Right.
then you can deduct that.
So if you're just paying a direct debit and that's you're on top of your direct debits, then there's no deductible.
Yeah. So now, I'm not sure. Yeah. So now, in terms of debts, so sometimes you have a short-term debt and long-term debt. So first of all, short-term debts. So any short-term debts, one thing to remember about debt is the thing we take into consideration is the guy you're going to pay to, is he actually asking you for this debt right now at the moment or not? So in the short-term debt, he will be asking you for that money because it's short-term. So you can deduct that from your zakatable assets. It will be deductible. However, long-term debts such as mortgage, you're going to be paying in installments, and you're not expected from the bank to pay the full amount. So if you've got a 30-year plan, for example, then he's not expecting you to pay all 30 years right now. He's only expecting however much you have for that month. So you cannot deduct that from your zakatable assets. But you can deduct the following year. So this, from however much you're going to pay for this following year, you can deduct that from your zakatable assets. And just one thing to remember is the thing that you're deducting is only the capital. You cannot deduct the interest as well. Yeah?
So the likes of, we talked about long-term debts like a mortgage, but then if you've got contracts like a mobile phone contract,
Yeah.
is that considered as well then?
Mobile phone contracts. That would come under something else. You wouldn't really that would come under something else. It would come under your basic necessities.
Right, so that's another slide.
Yeah, that's another slide. Also, student loans. So student loans, what normally happens is some people they don't pay off straight away. They don't stop paying off straight away. So you cannot deduct the amount until you stop paying off. So when you stop paying off, then you can deduct the yearly amount. Any questions? No? Just some non-deductible, you cannot deduct these. So future expenses and bills, explain that you cannot deduct these because it's not really common to you at the moment. Interest, so anything that is not halal, it is haram, you cannot deduct that from your zakatable assets. So it does include interest, any income gained from unlawful means such as alcohol, lottery, etc. And any of these wealths, the money that you gain from these wealths, you should give in charity without gaining any reward. Without the intention of gaining any reward, you should give away. Right, shares and pensions. Any questions up till now? No? Shares and pensions. So, with shares, you have two types. One is that you buy the share and your intention is to sell that share. So if you're intending to sell that share, then it will be it's like buying merchandise with the intention of selling it. So you'll have to pay zakat straight away. As in, once a year has gone by, you look at the value of that share and you pay zakat on that. However, if you have bought the share as a long-term investment, so what that means is basically you're trying to take benefit from the dividends, which means you're now basically a part of that company. So what will happen is you will pay in proportion of the company. So obviously the company will have zakatable assets and non-zakatable assets. So in accordance to that percentage of zakatable assets and non-zakatable assets. So for example, if someone has 20% zakatable assets, if the business has 20% zakatable assets and 80% non-zakatable assets, then you only need to pay 20% of the share that you hold. You only need to, the value of that share that you hold, you only need to pay 20% of that. You only pay 2.5% of the 20% of that. Yeah? It's a bit tricky, but there's an example of here as well. So see, for example, your share value is £1,000. So then you need to look at the data of your business, of the business you hold a share in, and see what the assets are like. So if 80% are non-zakatable and 20% are zakatable, then you only pay 20% of you only need to pay zakat on 20% of that £1,000. So 20% of 1,000 is 200, yeah? So you only pay 2.5% of 200, which is £5. Yeah? Any questions? Pensions. So in terms of pensions, broadly there are two types, those which are non-zakatable and zakatable. So there are some types of pensions where they are going to be deducted, you have no choice, they will be deducted from your wage or whatever. So for example, your national income, national insurance contribution. So stuff like this, you have no choice, you will have to pay, it will be given. It will go into a pension fund. So this is state pension, and in this, you do not pay zakat on this. Because it was deducted from your wealth with no choice. You had no choice to pay this or not, you had to pay. It was mandatory, it will be paid. So for this, you do not have to pay zakat on it. Then, in terms of other pensions, for example, the defined contribution plans. So sometimes what happens is the business, they give a portion of your salary and they place it in a pension scheme. So what you need to determine is whether this the employer he placed it into the pension scheme, did he place it in behalf of you as the employee, or did he place it in behalf of the employer? So if he placed it in behalf of the employee, then you are liable for all losses and benefit incurred, and so you will have to pay zakat on that. So you can't pay once you receive the wealth after, but you will have to backdate as well.
So does that then mean if cancer worked 40 odd years, they get 67, they get a pension from the employer or a personal pension, and they start paying zakat on that amount that they've received?
Yeah,
Backdate it from when the pension started.
you'll have to backdate.
So like 40 years rather than need to backdate it from then.
But that's if he's done it on behalf of the employee.
Yeah.
If he's
Or if you've got personal pension, not an employee based one, but your own pension, that's a private pension.
yeah. So even that you'll have to pay zakat on that.
But once you receive it,
Yeah, you can't pay whilst you don't have it. So if you've got enough money to pay, then you can. But at the end, if you want, you'll have to backdate as well. So now, if it's on behalf of the employer, so it normally happens in public sector, where the employer he'll place an amount on behalf of himself. So in regards to that, you don't need to pay zakat because you're not actually owner of this wealth. The employer, he's owner of this. He's liable for any loss or benefit incurred. So you will not have to pay zakat. You'll only pay zakat once you receive this wealth. Once he gives it you, now you are now ownership of this. Once you receive this wealth, you're ownership of this wealth, and so going forward, you'll have to pay zakat for this. Any questions? It doesn't really apply to you, lot. No. Now, how do you determine how much of that is? Because obviously, not the whole thing will be zakatable as well. So you need to first find out what you're looking at is an asset class. So what the ulama have done is they've taken a look of how much of it will normally, they made an average basically, approximation, depending on the class of how much will be zakatable. So Sharia funds 26% will be zakatable, so you only pay your zakat on 26% of that fund, and then same for all of these. 15%, 27% of his equity funds, 50% is mixed assets, and 100% for bonds, gifts, fixed interest funds. Now, what happens sometimes is it can be mixed. The class can be different. It can be a mixture of two. So how would you then determine how much you'd pay? So say give an example here that 50% was equity fund and 50% of the pension was for direct property fund. Now 27% you pay zakat on that 50%. So say for example you've got benefit scheme, let's take example £10,000. Now £10,000, out of that £5,000 is equity fund. So you pay 27% of that £5,000, 27% of that £5,000. And the other one was 50% for direct property fund, which is 15%. So you pay 15% of the other £5,000. So then if you do the full total, you do 27% of 50%, which is 13.5%, and 50% of 50% is 7.5%. So in total, you're paying 21% of the £10,000. You pay zakat. 21% of £10,000 is 2,100. Yeah. So you pay 2.5 on that, which is 52.5, £52.15. Any questions? No. So just to conclude, from everything we've done so far, you add up all your gold, your cash, silver, everything, adding the merchandise, any shares or pensions that you may have, you add those, and then any loans that you are owed to you by others, you have to add those as well, and then minus any debts owed. See, if you got any debts that you owe other people, you minus those, and then pay 2.5% of the total. Any questions so far?
So when we're talking about the contracts, you know, for example, by phone or
Yeah, it'll come after.
they come off the deductibles,
It'll come after. It'll come later on.
they come later.
Yeah. So recipients of zakat. So for now, all we've been talking about is when you're giving zakat, what do you have to give zakat of and what not. Now, who can receive zakat? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. That zakat are only to be given to the poor, the needy, to those employed to collect them, to those hearts who are to be won in the cause of the slaves, and those burdened with debt in the way of Allah, and to a traveller. So these are your masarif, these are the people that can receive zakat. Now there be detailed according to each one. So fuqara, innama sadaqatu al-fuqara. The first one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says fuqara. Fuqara is, faqir is a person who is poor, but he has wealth but less than nisab. So he still has wealth but he's less than nisab. Masakin, one thing to remember is you cannot give zakat to non-Muslims. They are not recipients of zakat, according to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, all four schools of fiqh. Masakin, the poor which has no wealth at all, you can give zakat to him. Amilin. Now, regarding Amilin, in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, what would happen is you'd have an Amir. So, as in back in the days, you'd have an Amir, and then this Amir he would have wilayat, he would have authority over the people. So he would be able to collect the zakat from people and then give out to the poor. And what would happen is he would send people out, and they would go and collect the zakat for him, and they would then give this zakat out to the poor. So those people that would go out, they would be eligible to take zakat also. Now, the ulama have written that it is necessary that this Amir, he has wilayat, he has authority. So in this day and age, it will only be really an Islamic government that can do this. So any charity that sends out people to collect people's zakat, they do not have wilayat, they do not have authority over the people, so they cannot take zakat. They cannot take zakat. They are not recipients of zakat. So anyone who works for a charity and takes zakat from people, they cannot receive zakat. Mu'allafat al-qulub. So even this really doesn't really exist in our day and age. Back in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, there would be a group of Muslims. So Muslims who are new, some weren't really, they weren't really close to the deen. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he would do was, he would give them zakat, so that it creates a bond between them and deen, and they come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also to avoid any potential harm, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give to people as well, zakat to certain Muslims, so that it does not cause any harm. So this doesn't really exist in our time, so it's fine. Fir riqab, slaves. So what would happen is, back in the days, a slave, he would have to pay off an amount. He would work and have to pay off an amount to the master, and then he would be able to, he would get freed. So it doesn't really exist in this time. So you can move on. Al-Gharimin. So this is someone who's in so much debt. So same thing here. Mortgage, you wouldn't really class as someone who's in so much debt because he's not expecting this money from you straight away. It's over a 30-year plan. So same thing here. He would not be able to receive zakat. Fi sabilillah. So this can be anyone who's gone out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anyone in jihad. Any poor soldiers that are in the Muslim armed forces, you can give zakat to them. Or anyone who's gone for Hajj and he has no wealth to continue his Hajj. So he's gone for Hajj, he doesn't have enough wealth to continue his Hajj, then you can give zakat to them. Or Ibn Sabil, someone who he's traveling. So even though he may have wealth at home, but because he has the wealth, he doesn't have any wealth with him at the moment. So for example, he's run out of wealth, he's run out of his money, then you can give zakat to him also. So now, just a quick recap. So type of assets which you need to pay zakat on: gold, silver, trade goods, and livestock, and cash as well. It's not on here, but yeah. And then that's for whether you have to pay zakat or not. You look at the zakatable wealth. Do you reach the threshold or not? Now to receive the zakat, you look at the non-zakatable wealth. So anything that's beyond your necessary assets. We'll come to our necessary assets later on. But anything that's beyond that, if that reaches the threshold, then you're not a recipient of zakat. But if it does not reach the threshold, then you can take zakat also. So necessary assets. So any clothes that's necessary for a person, your household goods, utensils, assets used for work, place of residence, furnishing, any debt which they owe. It's not long-term, it's not short-term debts. A phone or a laptop. So phone, you would say, is necessary in this time and age. Regarding laptop, if it's for work, then it will be necessary. But if it's just for pleasure, then you wouldn't really call it necessary. So you'd have to include that as part of your beyond necessary assets. Any questions? No? So now if someone, for example, he has zakatable assets and non-zakatable assets minus the essentials. So you don't look at essentials because you take consideration of that for whether you can receive zakat or not. You only take consideration of those assets which are not essential. So if someone has zakatable assets above the threshold, he will have to pay zakat. And if his non-zakatable assets minus the essentials is also above the threshold, he cannot receive the zakat. But sometimes what can happen is you have your zakatable assets are less than the threshold, so you do not need to pay zakat. But he cannot receive zakat as well because his non-zakatable assets minus the essentials is above the threshold. And if someone he has zakatable assets which are below the threshold, so he does not need to pay zakat. But his non-zakatable assets minus the essentials, that is also below the threshold, so he can also receive zakat. So for the green one, you're looking at whether you can receive zakat, and the blue one, looking at whether you need to pay zakat or not. Any questions? No? So now, yeah.
See, if you collect zakat, do you have to pay zakat
On the money you've collected. You don't pay zakat on money. The money you collected is someone else's wealth, so you need to give that out. Right, so one thing we need to remember is that when you take out your zakat, for it to be valid, it needs to be necessary that the person who is given to the poor people are giving to, they gain total ownership. and they are free to do with this wealth whatever they wish. So, just a few examples. Can you give it to a masjid then? Can you give your zakat to a masjid? Yeah. You cannot give zakat to your masjid because they don't get total. They do get total ownership, but then it's not to one person. It's like an organization. It's not really a person. It's not really a. So you cannot give zakat to a masjid. But sometimes what happens is the masjid, it can be an agent. So they may have students studying or something. So what we'll do is those students that cannot fund for their studies, they will keep the money for them. So in that case, that will be jais. Same with madrasa and orphanages. Can the zakat be used to fulfill the debts of a deceased person or for their burial?
Yeah, but sometimes
Can zakat be given to dig a well?
what are the
If it's for a certain person, then you can. Sorry? Yeah. Can zakat be given to a hospital?
if it's to save their life?
Yeah. So if what happens sometimes in hospital is those people who need medication but cannot pay for the medication, they will give it to those people. So in that case, you can sometimes. But it's also very important that you check that who are you giving to, and how are they giving out. It's important to check this. So, for example, sometimes what happens is some charities, they take your zakat. Now there are two types. So if that charity they know which poor people they are going to give to, then in that case, when you give your wealth, your what was mandatory upon you, your faridah, your whatever's in your whatever's upon you, is done now. So once you've given it to them, it's done. But if this charity, they don't actually have a specific group of fuqara, poor people that they will give to, rather they will go out and look and see who is poor, and so when they receive the money, then they will go out and look. In that case, whoever's your faridah is not fulfilled. So if that person who's taken that money now, if he passes away and that money goes missing or whatever, then it will be upon you, because it was your faridah, it was first upon you, and you have not fulfilled that. So it's very important that you make sure and you check that whoever you're giving to is reliable. Zakat cannot be given to one's child, grandchild, great-grandchildren, and so on, or even then you cannot give zakat to them. Or your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on. So anyone up and anyone down, you cannot give zakat to. Your brother and your sister you can give to. Anyone down and anyone up in your lineage, you cannot give to. One spouse, be it one's wife or husband, you cannot give to. Anyone who is a sayyid, from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you cannot give zakat to those. And anyone who he does not have the nisab of zakat, this came before, but he has goods which are above the threshold, that are besides the essential goods.
Why can we not give zakat to the slave kids?
I think came in a hadith. So for those people you cannot give zakat as well. Any questions?
person, but if the amount of zakat they give them, it will make their total wealth go over the nisab, would that be fine, or would there be anything like you'd have to do extra?
Say that again.
If you're going to give zakat to somebody, but the amount of zakat that you give to them makes their total wealth above the nisab amount, would there be something that you have to do?
So regarding this, it's not including this, but one should remember that he should not give. So you only give you don't give your full zakat to one person. You should try to give an amount which is less than the threshold to any given poor person.
Can you like take out a loan to pay zakat?
You cannot take out a loan to pay zakat. You should not take out a loan to pay zakat. Just a few points here. They've all come before. Just the last one, that zakat needs to be paid on jewelry every year. It is not the case that if one has paid it once, then he or she does not need to pay again. So every single year you need to pay zakat on that jewelry. If a person has a few houses with no intention to sell, then there is no zakat on that second home. So if you bought a few houses, one you're living in and the other one you're not selling it, then you don't need to pay zakat on that house. But if you bought the house with the intention of selling, then you will have to pay zakat on the house. And
Do you have to pay
if someone is
selling it, or
sorry,
do you have to pay zakat on before selling it? After
no, obviously before selling. If you sold it, then it's not in your ownership anymore. You don't need to pay zakat on it. If you put this house on rent, then the income that you gain from that, you'll have to pay zakat on that as well. But you don't need to pay. In that case, you will not need to pay zakat on the property itself. So just a few questions commonly asked. That if you have kept some money aside to fulfill Hajj, then you need to pay zakat on that wealth as well. Or sometimes what happens is parents keep money aside for the children for the future. You will need to give zakat on that also. Can zakat be paid in advance? It can. But again, like I said before, you should check on that date that have you paid the correct amount or not. If you paid less, then you need to give the additional amount. Interest money. Do you pay zakat on interest? No, anything that is haram, you do not pay zakat on. Is there zakat on diamonds which are for my personal use? There's no zakat on diamonds which are for personal use. In regards to intention, so do you need to have an intention? So you need to have intention that when you give to the poor, that he has intention that he's giving his zakat to the poor. Or a person, what you can do is, whilst he's taking out his zakat from his wealth, he can just give intention that this is the wealth I've taken out for zakat. Yeah. Does the person have to tell the recipient of zakat that there is zakat money? No, he does not need to say there is zakat money. My husband gave me jewelry on my marriage. Who is liable for zakat? Me or my husband? So because the wife is now the ownership, she will be liable for zakat. One thing to remember is there is no such thing as shared accounts in Islam. So sometimes the parents, they come together and they say that the wealth is both of us. Yeah, so there's no such thing of this in Islam. You should specify that whose wealth is whose, and then that person will then be liable for zakat. If zakat is being given for multiple outstanding years, items will be evaluated at their current price market. And zakat is not necessarily on gift vouchers. You need to pay zakat on that. And that's all it is. Any questions?